Hola, soy Alejandro Sauquillo y estoy aquí hoy con el gran David Havasi. David, he was a Tesla employee from 2012 to 2019, where he contributed to a 10x growth in the company. During his time, he ranked among the top 5 US salesmen month after month and left the company with a multi-million-dollar stake, earning him financial freedom. David, welcome to my show.
Thanks for having me, Alejandro. Great to be here.
It's a pleasure. I contacted you because I first read about you in Charles Morris' book on Tesla, and it's very interesting because now I'm writing a book on Elon Musk, the way that Elon Musk makes his company, and you worked for 7 years in the company. So I wanted to ask you, as I've read, you were born near Detroit. Your father was an auto industry executive. So you were in the old legacy auto environment, at least in your childhood, I guess, or whatever. How did you decide that you wanted to come back to be part of Tesla? Sorry.
I mean, the catalyst for me joining Tesla was there's a socio-economic element, kind of a geopolitical element, and an environmental element. So I'd say it was a cocktail of those things. The straw that broke the camel's back was really, well, I should say before that, I was always an auto enthusiast, being born and raised in the Detroit area. Everybody's parents worked for the auto industry. So whether it's manufacturing, engineer, design, and it was the big three. So it was Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, Dodge. And my dad happened to work for Dodge. So I always had a passion for auto design, performance vehicles, kind of dynamic automobile design. But there was definitely, back then in the 80s, and well, basically until Tesla, there was this polarity of the more fun a car was, the more terrible it was for the environment, the less efficient it was, and the more it burned. And so there was that dichotomy that I always struggled with, fancying myself an environmentalist, but also being an auto enthusiast. There's always this kind of thing, well, gosh, I really love this thing, but it doesn't bode well with this other thing that I'm passionate about. So that's why Tesla really was very compelling to me when I started following it way back when, in the AC propulsion days, even pre-Tesla, that kind of performance electric vehicle scene when it was budding, very, very early stages about 20 years ago. And I said, wow, that would be really great if that would happen. I'd be totally on board. But the straw that broke the camel's back was the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. It was the Deepwater Horizon, I think was the name of the oil rig, and it blew up, and it was this environmental disaster. It ravaged the entire Gulf Coast of the United States, particularly the Florida Gulf Coast, which I coincidentally now live. I was living in New York City at the time, and that was the catalyst for me. When that happened, something snapped, and I said, I've got to do something firsthand, where instead of just talking about, wouldn't this be great, I need to grab people and pull them in. And as timing would have it, that was just as the Roadster is being developed for Tesla, the first generation Roadster. And so that was the catalyst. That's where I said, well, who is doing this? Who is going to champion this transition? And by a country mile, it was Tesla. No one else was. It wasn't on anybody's radar. They kind of tinker with electrification, but no one was wanted to soldier this transition or champion this transition. So that's what brought me to Tesla.
You've spoken, David, about the three causes of Tesla's mission, that nowadays in 2023, everybody's speaking about the environmental part, but when you look back in like the beginning of Tesla, it wasn't that clear. And for example, Diarmuid O'Connell, that he worked in the lobby part and government, he said that he joined Tesla because of the geopolitical conflict after September 11. So out of the three missions, when you started in 2012, your colleagues or the average Tesla worker that you met, which was the main reason why they wanted to join Tesla?
I would say the predominant one of the three was, if I did kind of sample the room and get a gist of people's motivations, it would be the environmental aspect of it, the efficiency, wanting to wean people off fossil fuel addiction from an environmental standpoint. I mean, all of these things, though, are so intertwined, particularly for Americans, because the conflicts in the Middle East, the presence that our military has had globally, but particularly in the Middle East, there's this, not to get too political, but there's this kind of, there's these two narratives that existed. One was the patriotic one, we're spreading democracy, we're liberating these people, which sounds great. That's great. Everyone loves democracy. Everyone loves freedom. In fact, some of that military operation was called Enduring Freedom. So it's like, oh, how can you hate freedom? Freedom's great. Everyone loves freedom, So they'd give them these catchy catchphrases. You're like, oh, but yeah, isn't it really about the Caspian Sea pipeline and the access to the largest oil reserves in the world? Like, yeah, that's kind of a part of it too, isn't it? And in fact, that was the part of it. So there was kind of a marketing side of it, freedom, yay. And then there's this other part of it is like, boy, we really need this stuff because it kind of keeps the balance of global power and resources it caters it to one side of a geopolitical power to the other. So, and there is a lot of there's a lot of lives being lost in our military service people, and a lot of, so that of course is the most tragic cost. And then there was, the U.S. military budget dwarfs all other countries in the world combined. It's crazy, So, and I won't get on this pulpit too much too political, but we have teachers. Like my mother was a public school and elementary school teacher for 38 years, and luckily my dad being an auto executive, my mom would buy all the, and she was a teacher in inner city Detroit schools, public school system, so it's a very impoverished area. And she bought all the supplies for her kids for the classroom because the school had no money. The families that went there had no money. And so my mom would supply pencils, crayons, paper, rulers, you name it, scissors. And but her other teacher coworkers, younger ones or whatever, they had to work weekend jobs so they could afford to buy their kids things in the most wealthy country in the world, or the most, powerful country in the world. Well, we have, we're spending our money on all these wrong things. So so when you look at it from a first principles perspective, like, gosh, wouldn't we be better served to invest in innovation and not go down this technology for the past 100 years? It's costing lives, infrastructure, education, all these things are sacrificing for that. It didn't seem to make a lot of sense from a pragmatic standpoint. So when you weigh that, and then you look at environmental impact, and then, which doesn't get talked about enough, and the reason why Tesla is so successful is electric cars are just better cars. So it's like, they're cleaner, quieter, quicker, safer, roomier, easier to maintain, cheaper to maintain, all these superlatives. So it's like, why are we not doing that? So we should. And so that was a cocktail of those things. And I think people were in it for all of those reasons, even if they didn't realize it from a conscious level. The conscious level, though, the one that people really got behind, as far as if you had to read the room at headquarters or something, or any of the stores, was environmental, which is interesting because environmental again, in the United States, is a political issue for some reason. No, I don't know why, but it is. And so when you went locally to the store from the regional, when you went away from Palo Alto or Fremont, and you went to Tampa, Florida, for example, the debate, even though we had one of the biggest, climate, or I should say environmental disasters in the BP oil spill, which was an undeniable disaster, the concept of climate change is strangely viewed as something that can be debated as whether it's real or not real, which is very silly. It's like debating whether the sky is blue. So so we couldn't use, even though some of the people's, we found the employees' motives were maybe environmental to help the environment, have that be stopping carbon release into the atmosphere, things like that, warming of the oceans, all these things, the connectivity of all those things. We couldn't necessarily use that as, in Florida, for example, we couldn't use that as a narrative for customers because we didn't want to alienate the customer if they happened to not be on board with that concept. So we had to, even though that might have driven some of the employees within from a sales and marketing standpoint, we had to, the product had to win over the customer on its own merit outside of narrative. So on its superlatives, what it happens to do every day very well. When I first started with Tesla, I didn't quite understand that concept, that you didn't want to alienate certain customers. So I thought, and this is, 20 years ago, I was like, the stores should be saying, this car is so green and it's going to save the world. I mean, gosh, people should want to save the world, and that's the thing that will really bring people on board. And then with time, and then if you're in New York and California, people are like, yes, save the world. That's great. When some other places, people are like, no, I just want a fast car, and I don't care about all that saving the world stuff. And, or I don't believe that this will save the world or something, or help the world become a more sustainable, healthy place. So, so I get it why they didn't do that. They didn't want to. I think they saw that they didn't want to alienate any customer, because you never want to alienate a customer or say that you're not, just you don't want to separate them from their identity and what they believe to be important. So when I was discussing the superlatives or the amazing qualities of the product or the car, I actually never brought up environment down in Florida. I talk about all this, how great it was, safety, ease of maintenance, performance, all these things. And then the customer would say, and the environment, so I had to wait for them to give me the cue. And I'd be like, yes, that too. You could. And then I knew, okay, that is a value proposition for them as well. But I never came out of the gate swinging environment, like environment. So, and rightly so, because amazingly, Tesla is, you would think, just the like a progressive, tree hugging, granola crunchy liberal. It'd be like the poster child for that, or the chariot of that social political view. But what's so cool, it's transcended that where people just want a great product, and which I think is really great, and which is the way, of course, it should be. Something should exist in its own merit. These concepts that people cook up in their head, and what is right and what is wrong, that are kind of theoretical and debatable. Well, that has nothing to do with something that's quantifiably measurable as being superior, which is what Tesla did, with their product. End of that tangent.
No, it's great. And David, as I've started, you were like top salesman. So there's one thing that Elon Musk usually says, that he says, okay, titles don't matter. What matters is a proof of exceptional achievement. But people say, okay, that's good, but if I want to hire a salesman like you, I would, or for marketing, I would need somebody with experience. So what was your background before joining Tesla?
Yeah. Well, I had no formal automobile experience professionally, that's for sure. My background, like a lot of the people that were on my original team, was unconventional. So I was actually a Broadway performer for 15 years. So live theater for that's what I did. I was a dancer. You never know it now. I don't know. I think I still got it. But I was,
can you make some? Can you make some dance?
Yeah, you want me? I could jump into the splits or something for you. If you want. But give me some time to stretch.
Actually, now that reminds me that I watched one picture of you with your legs like this next to a trailer for a Model S, like the trailers once you had built it.
Yeah, that's right. So I come from a big dance background, and that's what I did professionally before I was recruited by Tesla. They wanted basically what happened was that was my background. That was the world I was living in, the entertainment industry, live entertainment, Broadway community of New York City. I lived in New York for 15 years. And so when I approached Tesla, I said, I'm not an engineer. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a designer. I have no inclination to be a car salesman at all, not in the traditional sense. But this is my background, and I do know a lot about cars because of my upbringing, just through kind of osmosis, just being there in it. And my original interview was in 2010 in Palo Alto, in Deer Creek, which was the original headquarters. They flew me out there, and I met with the team. And originally it was for Asset Light Roadster, and it was going to be in Texas. I think they're going to send me to Dallas, Texas. And I didn't get it. They ended up giving it to Will Nicholas, who's a great guy. He ended up being a regional supervisor at Tesla, and a really awesome guy. But they said, let's keep in touch, because in 2012, we're going to do the Model S launch program. It's going to be this huge undertaking for this small teeny company. Because when I went to interview, there were about 1,000 people at Tesla total, everywhere from engineers to manufacturing, although there wasn't much manufacturing then. And then ultimately, again, when I joined in 2012, there were about 3,000 people. So when I joined, it was summer of 2012 in May. Tesla, I was in contact with them, and then they said, hey, what are you doing now? And I said, Xanadu. And they said, what is that? And I said, it's a roller disco musical. they're like, okay. They're like, well, hey, we're looking to, we're getting Model S launch program going, and we're looking for people with unconventional backgrounds to join the team, people that are okay with ambiguity, can be creative in the field, can adjust quickly, can collaborate, can improvise, have a strong sense of mission, which was key. What we found out very quickly is for that first batch of people, particularly, it was totally driven by a mission, because we were working like 100-hour weeks for that. My first year was 100-hour weeks every week, and plus 100-hour plus. We basically woke up and worked, went to sleep, and we, like, the minute we woke up, we were working, and to the moment before we went to bed. And I would say, like, the world kind of melted away that first year. It was like a fog, like the world didn't exist. I remember interviewing Zach Sheehan from Clean Technica when we were doing our podcast about Tesla, which I highly recommend. If I'm going to plug something, Tesla Inside Out is a great podcast that we did about the early days of Tesla and things. Check that out if you'd like. But he's like, were you worried about the stock, or did you think about the stock early on, and we're like, we didn't care, we didn't know about anything, we didn't have time to think about that. It was literally this massive mountain that in front of us that we had to climb, which was the ramping and delivery and the logistics involved with delivering Model S, and which was staggeringly challenging. And so yeah, so that was, again, a little tangent there. So that was, my background was dance.
No, it's super interesting. As far as I have read in Charles Morris' book that I will link in the description, there were also in your teams like people from all different backgrounds. But now that you have spoken that you didn't have time to think about the stocks and everything, how did Tesla paid you? Because in your Clean Technicas articles, you put that you were granting thousands of stock options. So how did it work? And also, how did it work, the ESPPs, the Employee Stock Purchase Plan?
Oh, yeah. So basically, when I was hired, and this changed as Tesla grew, because the more and more people they hired, they couldn't be as generous with the stock plans, because by economies of scale, you can't, be giving 130,000 people what you gave 3,000 people, So when I started, they basically that role, Tesla has changed their pay structure. They'll change it every month. It's like, and that goes with everything with Tesla. Like every month, the way they hire and bring people on is different. So and that goes for practically every element of the business. But when I joined, it was we were salaried employees. It was based upon cost of living of where you lived. So I happened to live in New York City at the time. So New York City and the Bay Area were considered the highest cost of living in the United States, according to them. So it was a salary that was a solid salary for that for the area, and then you were granted stock options. Now, when I joined, the stock split adjusted was $1.23. Wow. That equated to pre-splits is about $27.
Yes.
And again, we honestly didn't know if Tesla would survive the next day. We didn't know if we'd have a job the next day. So the idea of the stock was like, yeah, okay, that's nice too. We weren't betting the farm on it, So the joke was, because a very successful auto company at that time, maybe their stock price was $40 a share, or something. That $45 a share, that was like Volkswagen or something, would be like, wow. So the global automakers like $45. So we thought, wow, if we become really successful, like if this thing really takes off, we're like, it could be one day, it could be like $50 a share. Wouldn't that be wild? Like if it was that, and then of course it's, orders of magnitude more than that now. I think the stock, my portfolio is up 24,000% since I started, which is of course really great. So yeah, so that's how that worked. And then so that's when I was in delivery. And then for when I became asset light a year later, which is the kind of the field sales, there was a salary which was a little bit more of a modest salary, but then there was a commission-based system, which was very generous, and the targets they wanted us to deliver or wanted us to sell. And I get into more of the asset light role because it's a little different. It's not anything like a traditional auto sales role at all. Yeah, they wanted me selling, like, what was the target? I think it was 12. At first it was 12 a month or 16. I think it was 12 a month and it became 16 a month. So, you talk about 3 cars, four Model S a week. And we jokingly say if Porsche sold 2 Panameras in a week, they do backflips. like Suncoast Porsche of Sarasota, they sold 2 Panameras. They're like, woo, everyone go home. This is great. Meet at the quota. I always said the joke was if I sold 4 Model S in a week, so $430,000 cars, which they were very happy with. Don't get me wrong. They thought that was great. But then, of course, being Tesla, they were like, why wasn't it 5?
Always pushing it.
4 a week is great. Why not 5? Why not 6? So I think the most Model S I ever sold I think I sold 9 in a week. That was the most I ever sold. I have colleagues that sold more in certain areas, but in my area, which was kind of an outpost in relation to other places, it has since become Florida's a huge market now, but back then was not. I think when I came down here, there were 2 sales locations, and they were in the southeast Florida, so the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. We had 2 locations at the time, sales locations, and I think now we have around 20 in the state, which is crazy. It's like order of magnitude more. So, but anyway, yeah, that's how the payment structure worked, basically.
David, you have said one thing that I wanted to ask you. You said, okay, they paid me part in a bonus of like variable with sales. And Tesla has usually said, okay, when we created the stores, the people that are on the store, inside the stores, they're not paid on commission. So was it different for the light?
Yeah, it was different. I was actually on a different pay structure for a while than the store people, because I actually liked that the store people it was not a commissioned thing. And they did go back and forth. There'd be times where it was and times when it wasn't, times when it was, times when it wasn't. So what they'd do is they'd say, oh, we'll give you more hourly, or maybe they'll do an adjustment of the stock option thing, but we're not going to do commission. And I liked that because I actually liked the no commission thing for the people that they set that up for, because it removed that kind of salesman-y mentality from the customer. So the customer is like, oh, because I liked, and I was a very big fan of this, because it's a meritocracy. So annually, for me, the situation I was in, you'd get performance bonuses. So the more you hit your KPIs, which is your key performance indicators, they would say, hey, good job, here's more stock, and they'd issue you more stock. And then there's a 4-year vest. So it would vest quarterly over 4 years. So you'd get 25% of it the first year, 50% second year, 75% third year, whatever, and then 100% of that particular vest. And then they do annual performance reviews, and they'd say, oh, well, this was great, this was okay, can be better, and based upon that, and peer review. So you could, if someone did something that was really cool, and then it might have went under the radar, we had a central system where you could say, everyone should know about this. This should be officially noted that this person did this really cool thing. And then that database was directly connected to that person's annual review. So that was cool. So there was a peer element as well. People would try to game that, particularly the millennials. They're like, hey, will you write that I did this thing? And we're like, no, it's because that's so lame. Like, you don't write something someone asks you to write it. That's not the spirit of that program. So I never wrote anything if somebody asked me, like, hey, do you see me do that thing? It's like, if you have to ask, it's not, what you did wasn't that cool. Like it should be so cool. People like, everyone else needs to, that person's great. Like, give that person a hand, shouldn't, in other words, in showbiz, you shouldn't ask for applause. It should be drawn from the people that see what you just did. So, so in that way, there's the meritocracy, and then there's the peer, kind of that peer review element, which is great. And so high performance is rewarded, just as low performance would be frowned upon, obviously. When we do our sales meetings, and this was savage. They had a chart, and there was green on top and there was red on the bottom, and there's the middle, which wasn't any color. It was just there. Green universally is good, red is universally bad. And so the top people, they would give the whole meeting, the two groups that got the most attention were the green group and the red group. And they would basically say, green group, you're killing it. Tell us your best practices. Why are you having the success that you are having? And you'd disseminate. And this part of Tesla's internal feedback loop. Another reasons why Tesla is so incredibly successful is they've constant feedback loops internally between colleagues and between programs, and they can adopt best practices. Because sales, we're all corporate employees. So I didn't work at Billy Bob's Tesla of Manatee County, it wasn't this franchise. I was a Tesla employee. So my feedback went right up the ladder to corporate. And then they could take those best practices and they could disseminate them globally to be like, hey, this guy in Sarasota is onto something. It turns out if you do this and do that, it really pays off. So, and vice versa, anybody else from all over the world, they could say, yeah, this person in Hong Kong is this cool idea. And it turns out that the return on that investment, or that return on that action, is incredibly good. So let's do that. Everyone do that, or try it. So, and that's what they do with the green group. Green group, you're killing it. How are you doing it? What's the magic sauce? And then the red group, which you didn't want to be in, everyone said, everyone look at these people. They are not doing it. And so they'd first ask a very compassionate thing. And they'd ask it of the people who are not in green group. What do you need from us, from a resource perspective, to get you to green? Which is, green is exemplary performance, is that toppy top. And they had asked that of red group as well, but red group was more of a morality tale. Or red group was, then they'd bring up red group and say, why is this so bad? And they'd pull up their dashboards and their correspondence with customers and their test drive ratings, and their call logs, and they'd notice a pattern. Why didn't you follow up with this person? Why did this person feel that they weren't corresponded with? Why are the cars dirty? Why, like all these things that we're like, oh, okay, so there are a lot of things that can make this better. Let's get to that. And if it's not the right job for that person, and they are in the red a lot, then Tesla's not the right place for them. I remember early on when I was asset light, it was just it was just me. It was me, an iPad, and a Model S, and I'd go to people's homes to give test drives, and people's businesses, their offices where they were working at. And there's a lot of long hours then too. That second year is in 2013. And then the regional, Graham Carroll, he was the regional sales manager at that time. And really awesome guy. He's like old school roadster days. We call him a founding father. He's now in part of the semi program. And I was doing really well. Particularly at that time, and he said, the guy which I should say, there's a guy, it's not there's this guy Cale Brock in Georgia who would become legendary within Tesla. It's something crazy. He sold like 40 Model S a month. It was like crazy. Kale was the king, and everyone bowed for him. He was incredible guy. I can't say enough about his abilities. He started out in delivery with me as well, and then became asset light. He was my counterpart in Georgia. But right before he came on, there's another guy who wasn't with Tesla very long, and he was really struggling when we first started Asset Light Model S program, which is the field sales. For those who don't know what Asset Light is, it's the precursor to brick and mortar stores. So before there was a store, like an actual physical store, they would send, I call it the Johnny Appleseed of Tesla. They would send the representatives regionally. We'd just bust out kind of guerrilla style drives, and we'd have an iPad, and we'd design the car on the person's couch in their house. And then we had inside sales kind of setting up drives for us. And what made it really fun is there's no superchargers at this time too, which that made it a lot of fun too. But so anyway, Graham, the regional sales manager, reached out to me and said, there's this guy in Georgia who's really struggling. Now, this guy I'm referring to, just to be clear, is not Kale. Kale came after that, and
the other one.
In a amazing juxtaposition, became like the greatest ever at that job. But the guy before Kale was really struggling, and Graham's like, can you give him a call and kind of talk him through what he's doing, answer any questions that he may have, and maybe give some insight to kind of get some wind in his sales. So of course, absolutely. And so he called, and he was very flustered and exhausted and tired. That's the kind of impression that I got. And he said, God, he's like, I'm staying at work until 8 at night, and I'm getting up at 5, and I'm working weekends, and I haven't had a day off in a month. And, and I don't know what he was expecting me to say. And my response was, yep.
Welcome to the club.
That's it. That's the job, and he's getting that burnout where, and I think that was the question, and I think that really outlines mission, because I think he got it because it was a job, and I got this job selling this cool product, and if you viewed it as a job, it's a hard job, and there are other jobs that are easier, maybe pay more at that time, in the world that Tesla was in at that time. So if you're not doing it for the mission, it doesn't become very appealing after a while. It becomes masochistic. Not even masochistic. Masochistic implies there's pleasure. It becomes torture. So he was feeling tortured, and where for me it was what was that? There's that saying, man will endure any suffering as long as they could see meaning behind it. I think that guy, he was a survivor of a concentration camp, said that. He's escaping me. He was a famous author. He's a survivor of the Buchenwald concentration camp.
Yes.
It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, people can Google it. But anyway, I'm paraphrasing his. Do you know what I'm talking about? Pretty prolific author. Victor. Yes.
Is something, but right now I don't have it. I've read the book. Yes, he was. Yeah,
there you go. Yeah. So, but that is, obviously that's the worst of the worst situation that a person could be in. What Victor described, but that's a pretty universal concept where people will endure any suffering as long as there's meaning behind it. But if you don't put meaning behind it, you ask yourself, why am I enduring this? And that's what this guy was going through. Victor Frankl. Viktor Frankl. That's it. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So my kind of the lesson, all I could give to this guy was, how much you are feeling you're working, you actually need to work more. So if this is an uncomfortable spot for you now, he's gonna burn out, pretty soon, and he did. It was not the right role for him, and I don't blame him, because people say, do you recommend working for Tesla? And I say no, because I don't recommend it. I think if you know you want and need to work there, you should, but no one should talk you into it, because there's a bill of goods that, I don't know. I always equate to it as it being a calling. So like joining the priesthood or joining the military, you should do it because you feel you need to, or you feel like that's where you can make a difference, or you feel you want to be a part of a better world, or protect, you know what I mean? You should see it as a calling, because then when it gets hard, you're like, well, this is my calling, and I should endure this, and it's for a greater good. So, but if you don't associate what you're doing with if you don't associate a sacrifice with a greater good, then you ask yourself why you're suffering, and you should, just do something else. So,
this interview is just a small part of the research that I have made for my book, The Musk Way. After 2.5 years of blood, tears, and sweat, and after interviewing former Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and PayPal employees, I have come up with a framework that Elon Musk repeats over and over in all his companies. So let me ask you just one quick question. Do you feel that your career has reached your full potential? If your answer is not a clear and confident yes, the Musk Way is for you. Back to the interview. You did have this calling, and I've read in the article I've told you before the interview, me and Old Blue of Clean Technica, that I will join it, that it's brilliant. And also in Charles Morris, you explained so many anecdotes of how you manage, because as you've said, there were no Tesla store in the part of Florida that you were. So you had to do everything to get people to pay attention to you and to your car, the Model S, and also the Roadster. Well, what is the craziest moment or the craziest sale that you have ever done in your period in Tesla?
There's there are many.
Or tell us many.
There are, well, even before, the first thing that comes to if I'm just going to kind of stream of consciousness, there was, and it was actually before I was selling my first solo delivery, back my first year there was, it has to do with sales, because the guy ended up buying more Teslas, but it was to an oil sheik who lived, I believe he's a Lebanese oil sheik, and he lived in the Gold Coast of Long Island. So basically where the Great Gatsby takes place, like where the old robber barons, the old robber barons, the turn of the century robber barons had these palaces on the Long Island Sound, just east of New York City on Long Island. And it was called the Gold Coast. And yeah, he lived in Locust Harbor, I think was the area. And he's a super wealthy guy. He was a billionaire, and he also had diplomatic plates. He was a diplomat, so we had to get diplomatic plates. So we had never done that before. We had to figure that out. So that was fun. But he had a fleet supervisor. So he had a guy that manages all of his cars for him. I never talked to the customer personally, because he has people that talk to other people for him. So, but his fleet supervisor, so the home he has on the Gold Coast was a palace. It's like the only way to describe it. It looked like a hotel, but it was somebody's home. And there was a main entrance, and then, which is this big gilded kind of gate thing. And then there's like the service entrance, which was actually really nice for a service entrance. So I delivered it to the service entrance. And then where the guy kept his cars, it was like a horse stable but for cars. This is like, I forgot how many cars, like over a dozen cars there. And they're all plugged into like a trickle charger for the 12-volt battery, so that, it's like Ferraris and Bentleys and Bugatti, like you name it, every kind of car. And so I delivered, and he got a black 85 Model S. So 85 kilowatt hour Model S, just like black, very executive, like black on black, almost like you'd consider like a Lincoln or a S-Class Mercedes, just very executive, very, understated, but elegant, so anyway, I pull it off. I give the orientation to the fleet supervisor, who's this really, really great guy. And he says to me, I got to be honest with you, there is a huge chance that the client might not even drive this car ever. He might not even realize he has it. And I said, that's fine. Okay. I said, just make sure it's plugged in. You can keep it at a low state of charge, just to, for the 12 volt and for the maintenance of the battery management system. And I said, that's fine. I say, just keep it plugged in, even if it's at the 110, the guy's like, cool. So a few days later, even a week or two later, I get a call from the fleet supervisor, and he said, the client loves the car so much, it's the only car he ever drives. All of his other cars are collecting dust, and he wants to order a Model X, which the Model X at that time was the prototype. They didn't unveil what would become the production Model S. It was the one that was unveiled in 2011. The prototype, and but you could take a reservation for it. So you want to get a signature Model S, which I think was like a $40,000 reservation, and so I set him up with Long Island, the sales team in Long Island, to get that. But I just thought it was really interesting that you had this billionaire oil sheik who could get any car he wants and drives any car he wants when he wants, and that car eclipsed all of them instantly. He's like, it's the only car he drives. It has become the only car he drives. So I thought that was a cool early testament. And that was my first solo delivery. I was doing deliveries. The first couple deliveries, we'd do them in tandem, just because two heads are better than one, or there's that Navy SEAL saying, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. It's good to have that person, to solve problems and things. But as we scaled, we knew that we had to go solo to divide and conquer. That's where that picture that you mentioned of me doing the splits on the trailers, that was in I believe that particular picture was taken in Mountain View, California, which is in the Bay Area, close to Palo Alto. That's where we were staying when we were training in the summer of 2012. We were doing field training. So field training was you had to take people from all walks of life, like me, and make sure they could drive a truck and a trailer and load a car onto it and on and off, and maneuver that trailer into tight spaces, maybe urban spaces, because trailer's really wonky. I don't know if anyone's ever driven a trailer. It's not intuitive. It's counterintuitive the way it moves. And there's a 22-foot Featherlight trailer, so 7 meters, so pretty long aluminum trailer. So anyway, we did field training where they would give us scenarios where we had to park the trailers in certain places in certain ways. So that happened to be a supermarket or grocery store parking lot. They said, okay, parallel park them in the corner of that. And then we called it a proof of life shot. So you had to take a picture to show training team that you did it. The training team at that time was Dan Migan, who's another like Tesla legend. He's there since the beginning of the Roadster days. I believe he's still there. He was so amazing. And he so we wanted to take these pictures, but we wanted to make them funny. So we'd be like standing on our heads or, just trying to do the silliest things. So me, having a split in my repertoire, I was like, I'll put them close and I'll do like a Jean-Claude Van Damme split between them or something like that. So that's the backstory behind that picture. But because we wanted, when they were looking through them, we wanted to go, oh, because that's another thing that made everyone sane too, was at work, it was kind of a whistle while you work mentality where the job was so hard, but if you could make each other laugh in those little moments, have it be like a little cultural Easter egg, that maybe, that person will get, even if it's really obscure or something like that, you want to, and it won't take any time because of course you don't want to waste time, but it's like, oh, we need to do this anyway. Might as well, have a little fun with it. So, and you see that throughout Tesla's products too. These little nuggets that don't really have a function. they don't
like the 11, no?
What's that?
The
Yeah,
11 volume or the flight mode, or yes.
Yeah, going to 11, 42. Yeah. So you have Spinal Tap references. You have Monty Python references. Yeah, one of the most surreal experiences that I've had working for Tesla is when I'd have an interaction with Elon about Monty Python, because we're both big Monty Python fans. But I also did Spam-A-Lot, which was the Monty Python musical. So Eric Idle, who's a member of Monty Python, wrote that musical, and I know Eric. And Eric is also a Tesla owner. So it's kind of this Rick and Morty multiverse where I talk Monty Python with Elon and I talk Tesla with Eric. so like the Monty Python world is talking Tesla and the Tesla world is talking Monty Python. And then they do, if you name your car Patsy, if you name your Tesla Patsy, that's a Monty Python Easter egg. So the foot of God comes and stomps the screen, and then the icon of the car on your app is a little Patsy, and when you summon it to you, yeah, and when you summon it to you, it sounds like coconuts. It goes, and the summon button becomes 2 coconuts, because in Holy Grail, instead of horses, they ride coconuts. So, I mean, and there's tons of those, there's the 007 Easter eggs, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Easter eggs. That's another thing too, is, and of course, a lot of these are from the mind of Elon, and Elon's a Gen Xer, like myself. So kind of our cultural references are kind of the decade that most influenced our worldview was the 80s. So a lot of these pop culture references are from the 80s. Have it be the Lotus from The Spy Who Loved Me, which is an Easter egg in the Tesla cars. All these things. So that's always fun. In the internal training things at Tesla, I think I could say this because it isn't giving away any trade secret or something, but when they would they'd give hypothetical customer scenarios, and one of them that they'd use all the time, so they'd make up a customer. It was a hypothetical customer, so it was just made up, but it was always, the customer's name was always Peter Venkman, which is the character from the original Ghostbusters movies. It was the Bill Murray character. So it was always like, Peter Venkman has his lease is up on his BMW M5, so it was always Peter Venkman, which is just hilarious to do. And again, if a Gen Xer all the millennials and Gen Z people went over their head, and I'd just be like, it's Peter Venkman. So hilarious.
You didn't understand it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but they did that. There's somebody in the training team at headquarters is like, somebody's going to find this hilarious. Somebody out there. Yeah. So, yeah.
You've spoken about your connection with Elon Musk. As I don't want to steal more time from you. As the last question, I wanted to ask you, like, how would you define Elon Musk?
How would I define
from your experience?
Well, briefly, he's a complicated guy, but I would say, if in one word, it'd be driven. So his work ethic is, and I'm sure his work ethic has kind of become legendary, but it is true. Like, he is one of the most driven humans on record. I don't know anybody else who has sacrificed so much of their own time and money, and
do you have any anecdote? Do you have, sorry, David, any anecdote of this driven that you have experienced yourself watching him, or heard some other colleague? Or
yeah, I mean, they're the ones that are pretty widely known, like him sleeping on the floor of the factory, and I mean, we would get emails that you look at the time they were sent, and it was, 5 a.m. So you do the math and you're like, well, either he's up really early Eastern Standard Time, or he's up at 2 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and he's busting, he is thinking about, what they can do. And it would be like, on a Sunday, so you're like, why? This is a Sunday as it is, So, so there were those things, and it happened all the time. The also the brevity. There's a lot of those stories where Elon would ask for something, and people would do an all-nighter, not sleep through the weekend to give him what he asked for, and then they'd hit send, be like, oh, I wonder what he's gonna say, and people have told the story before, and then his reply would be, okay. The person gave himself this whole thing. That was the only feedback. They're like, okay, I guess it's okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think just the general, I'm trying to think of any particular anecdotes. The anecdotes that come to mind are where he asked people, because I think he operates in that way. He gets a lot of guff about, timelines and things like that, where he'll set a timeline and then maybe it doesn't quite meet that timeline, but Tesla ultimately does it, but it just takes a little longer. I think, and he's gotten better at this, but I think for a long time, he viewed that everyone had the work ethic that he had. So if there was 100,000 of him, yeah, they'd probably do it in that timeline, but there's not. And then there's also, there are certain guidelines that you have to follow for how long people can work. And, and the bigger the company got, you had to be wary of that, because it just became more publicized and more kind of sensationalized. Like, oh, they're working people to the bone. And I think that was a huge misunderstanding from the outside world, is that that's how hard people had to work, or as Tesla wouldn't have made it. People would say, how did Tesla survive? It's like, because people worked harder than most would think was reasonable. So and so to answer your question, he was the kind of the personification of that. He walked the walk. He wasn't the the CEO sitting on a beach barking out orders. He was the person working the hardest, so you couldn't outwork him. So I thought that was really good for morale, particularly in the early days. There was no question that no matter how hard you're working, Elon was working harder and he was giving more. So you couldn't give more than him. So because I always say there's this thing. There's a thing with Tesla that no matter what role you had, and this is such a fascinating concept. It probably goes with other corporate structures as well, but Tesla was the only corporate structure that I had experience with outside of showbiz, because showbiz is completely different than corporate world. Although I have to say, as corporate worlds go, Tesla was most like showbiz, because it's more fast and loose than other corporate environments, I'd imagine. But everyone at Tesla was convinced that they had the hardest job at Tesla. And it wasn't being recognized how hard they were working. So so I always thought that was a funny thing, but everyone knew that their job wasn't as hard as Elon's. So I think that, so if you'd asked me that, like, that was kind of the underlying, from my perspective, was no one thought he was like the in an ivory tower. I have a fun little anecdote. Yeah, the first when the first time I saw Elon, I talked about this in the Tesla Inside Out podcast. I might mention it in one of my articles at Clean Technica. I was riding a bike through Fremont, which is how you got through the factory because the factory is so huge. And that was when Model S first started. It's only about like 1/10 of the factory is being used. The rest was vacant, and just a little sliver was being used at that time. And Elon, the CEO of the company, was on the very first time I ever saw him in person. He was at a folding coffee table with a folding chair and a laptop in the body and white section of the factory, just like working. And so he could be right there with the employees. And then a year later, I was actually in Fremont, and I was on one of those like tour trolley things that you can take. And so much happened just in 1 year with the expansion, because I'd gone to the East Coast, then down to Florida, and then I was back there. And the person said, everyone knows that's Elon's desk, because it's not a desk, it's literally the same kind of like cheap folding coffee table in the middle of the factory floor. But he had the Motor Trend Golden Calipers Award, where because Model S had since become Motor Trend Car of the Year, which in America is the most coveted award in the auto industry. It's widely viewed as the most coveted. It's like winning the Oscar. And so he kept the golden calipers at his desk. So he wasn't there at the time, but he carried it with him because he was so proud, So because like so many people said that Model S would never exist, let alone garner. That's like it'd be like telling Tom Hanks that he would never amount to anything in showbiz. And then being like, and then him becoming Tom Hanks. You're like, I guess look at what we have here. So that was like his little the victory lap. It was like his little blankie. I think he took him with him everywhere. That's how you knew. It was kind of that validation. So, but anyway, very long answer to that. Yeah, I'd say determination. He's the real deal. Obviously, he's a complicated guy, and I think people just need to. I think he's one of the most misunderstood people of our time, as far as people getting what he's actually about. You'll hear things where people will say he's a greedy billionaire. It's like that person obviously has no idea what this guy's about. Like he literally has like this 3 T-shirts. Wears the same clothes every time. As because you've been living and breathing Tesla as well. I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but anybody who doesn't know that, I'd say that's a huge misconception. That when I come up with people like, he's this greedy billionaire. It's like, well, the billions is a product of the percentage of ownership he has in the company. So it's not like he's, doing backstrokes and and piles of gold bullion, it's like, no, he happens to have a large percentage of ownership in that company, and the company's valuable. So that has value. So that is net worth, that adds net worth. So, but he's not going out, buying, gold toilets or anything, So anyway, he's dedicated. That's his thing. Determined. Yeah.
David, it's been a blast, and the anecdote of the Motor Trend trophies.
Yeah, that's so a good funny little story, right? I was trying to think like this little nugget. You go down the gosh, which one did you say? That's a good one.
That's great. I wanted to ask you like one last favor. Okay, maybe another one is like, I have a tradition in my channel. This is not for the book, that every time that I have a guest, I ask him or her to play the 1-word game, in which I say one concept and the guest, aka Mr. David Havasi, says one word. So are you
like a free association kind of thing?
Yes. No, yeah. Yes. I tell you like one concept, and you say just the first word that comes to your.
Okay. Sure.
Okay. So, David, what is the first word that comes to your mind when I tell you Tesla Roadster Glacier Blue?
Favorite.
Great. Model S.
Revolutionary.
Reaction of customers with their first Tesla acceleration of your customers.
Euphoric.
New Tesla Roadster that you plan to have.
Yes. Badass. Compound word.
It's good. It's good. Your time at Tesla.
The first word that comes to my mind is honored.
Cybertruck.
I already use badass. Cyberpunk is the first thing that comes to mind. Is that a compound word? Cyberpunk. It's the first phrase.
No,
yeah.
we will put it together.
Yeah. Future. Yeah.
Future of Tesla.
Abundant.
And last but not least, David Havasi.
Positive.
And it's right, because in LinkedIn, you describe yourself that you try to give smiles to everyone, and I can experience, and everybody can experience. So speaking about LinkedIn, where can people that watch this video follow you?
Yeah,
Or
I mean, it's so funny
your...
that my online presence is kind of an afterthought. But if you care, I would, you know, there's I would say just the at DavyDo2000. That's my Twitter, and then I'd say the Clean Technica articles that I've written. I try to keep it as a log of some interesting things at Tesla that I think people may find interesting. You know, Elon said that the real story of Tesla is all the people that worked incredibly hard and believed in that dream, and that's a story that should be told. So I agree with that. That I try to do that with those. So I'd say just keep an eye out on those as well. There's a link. There's like a link that aggregates all my articles. There's like an archive at Clean Technica. If you just Google my name and Clean Technica, it'll come up. And I write articles every once in a while. Basically, what determines whether something's going to be an article is if I write a social media post, and if it's longer than 3 paragraphs, I'm like, oh, this is an article now. So I'm like, I might as well make it an article. So,
okay. David, before the interview, you said you speak a little bit of Spanish, so it's great, because all the time that I have a guest, I ask him or her. Okay, I think they're in all Kims. Well, okay, the out on space, all this more male one. But I ask him to say the same sentence that I say at the beginning, that is, hola, soy David Havasi y estoy aquí para que triunfes. That it means, hello, I'm David Havasi and I'm here for you to succeed, to have success.
Oh, okay. Okay, I got the hello, I'm David Havasi part. I'll have to work on the second part. So wait.
Hola, soy David Havasi y estoy aquí para que triunfes.
Hola, soy David Havasi.
Y estoy aquí es here, y estoy
right here.
aquí,
okay, yeah. Estoy aquí, okay.
Para que triunfes, for you to succeed.
Para que triunfes.
Yes.
That one, okay. Wow, that was so hard.